and welcome to Tell Me a Story, the only podcast that asks your favorite authors and illustrators how and why they came up with your favorite story. This podcast will feature writers and illustrators from the Indian children's literature world. We will journey behind the pictures and the books and uncover the ideas and the inspiration that form the stories we love to read. I'm your host, Rati Girish, and I can't wait to sit down to chat with the people who have kept my kids and me enthralled with their creations. Today on Tell Me a Story, I'm talking to an author who I literally grew up reading. Her Pyare Lal and Lajwanti stories in Tinkle books were a backdrop to summer vacation train travels, hilarious and unforgettable. She has written several short stories, historical tales, biographical sketches and picture books. Her latest book, The Queen Who Rules the Waves, published by Hachette India, is the history book we all wish we could have had in school. Filled with tales of valor and courage by kings and queens who ruled in India, this is an unputdownable book and a must-read for children this summer. I am beyond thrilled to welcome Indra Ananthakrishnan to the show today. Welcome, Indra.
Thank you, Rati. So I hope these few minutes will be quite satisfying for you, me, and the listeners.
Okay. So I want to dive right in and ask you, what led you to writing The Queen Who Ruled the Waves? It's steeped in history. It's got stories weaved around people that we already know about from our history textbooks, but it's done in such an interesting manner. So tell me, what led you to writing this book?
Well, if I start telling you that, it's going to be quite ironical because history is one thing I disliked as a subject when I was in school. So, but later on, when I grew up and started doing some general reading on history, then I developed an interest. So the inspiration was first dislike and then like. So I read books like William Dalrymple, Subhadra Sen-Gupta, Devika Rangachari, Chitra Divakaruni, and Vanessa Sassoon. She's written a beautiful book on Buddha. So such books really inspired me to love history. And immediately my attention turned to the younger readers. I said, what if history is presented in such a beautiful way? Then children will just lap it up. Otherwise, I think generally children try to avoid history in school textbooks. And you can't blame the textbooks because they have to do a lot in a very short time. So they just give dates and names, unpronounceable names, and, just that. So that's what made me interested in presenting history in nice form to the younger readers. I wanted to inculcate interest in history among children by embellishing episodes taken from kings and queens and their lives, and using my creative talents to make the story interesting without distorting historical facts. If I start distorting facts, then historians will rise up against me. So I should be very careful in not distorting facts, at the same time present it in a good way. So I thought of unusual episodes, lesser known royals, their lifestyle. Like, for example, there's a king who was a musician. And they were architects amongst kings, amongst royals, and they were naturalists, and they were dancers, and nawabs who were warm-hearted. Nawabs, we just know about their dress and their lavishness and the food they eat and all that. But behind all that, they had a warm heart and they did a lot of good for the people. So these were a few things that interested me, and I said I must write about them. I sincerely hope they start liking history.
Oh, they definitely will
So,
because it's really it's quite a page turner because every time you finish reading a story, it's not like you can stop there. You want to know who's the next king you're talking about or who's the next royal and what's the next story. So it's definitely an unputdownable book.
I'm glad you find it so. I'm really glad. That's what I want it to be. Especially for the younger readers who are going to be the future citizens of our
Mm,
country, they should be learn to be proud of our country, proud
correct.
of the past, how much the kings and queens have done for our country to shape it in this manner.
Mm. No, a book like this, you've got about 15 stories in there, and definitely a book like this would have taken you a lot of time for, a lot of research, a lot of extensive research. So tell me about the research that you did. How many hours, how many months did you spend painstakingly finding these stories?
Oh, really, lots of time. Because when I started looking into history, it was mind boggling. Believe me, there have been so many kings and queens in each region,
Hmm.
in each era, in each dynasty, who have done a lot for our country. I myself started feeling more proud about my country after reading about these kings and queens.
Right.
So I had to select, it was a very difficult task, to select and narrow down to just about 17 stories I have written.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to cut down on the long list that I had and make it a shorter list and shorter list till I came down to just these few, covering a different era starting from the Sangam period, which is
Mm.
the most ancient era, and then slowly going through different dynasties and different regions of India had to be covered. Then finally, I had to start reading up, reading, and then contacting some people, some historians, which
Oh.
I mean, I had to do it on email. But there was one Mr. Dr. Pratap Singha
Mm-hmm.
Raja from Kerala. He is a very big historian, and he came down to my level and gave me facts about the life of Swati Tirunal, which I could use in my story. When I sat down to write, I had to work with the editor and the editorial team of Hatchet, to whom I'm very thankful, to polish the manuscript.
So you've mentioned in your foreword that, you also mentioned earlier in this conversation that you disliked history in school, but then you came to realize later what you have missed when you started reading these books. So talk to me about
Yes.
how books like The Queen That Ruled the Waves, how does that help rekindle curiosity for kids in history particularly? Because of course, especially the royals that you have chosen are lesser known royals.
I think they would to a large extent because once they read about that particular king or
Mm-hmm.
queen, they would I'm sure they would want to know more about their lives and how they fought against invaders, or for example, Swati Tirunal, being a musician, at the same time he looked after the government so well. And
Yeah.
even the Mughals, we know Mughals only as rulers and
Mm.
fighters and war, and Aurangzeb, Jahangir was such a interesting naturalist. He had amazing animals as pets, like the zebra, and
Zebra
his
number.
father had a camel and an elephant as as pets. So all these, I'm sure, would kindle the curiosity of the children. Ah, I must read more about these
Mm.
kings and queens. And they would start reading, doing some general reading, which they don't do while in school. They just read the history books and get their marks and pass the exam and all that.
Correct.
But later on, when their curiosity gets kindled, there are so many books they could read about these kings. I had to make it very short because these were it was a short book of 200 pages. But reading about the Mughals and the Nawabs and all that, there's so much to read. Which, if children get interested, they can really read a lot and get inspiration from them.
Yeah. No, I said, talking about how short these stories are, they're just perfect size, as my kids and I have discovered. They're the perfect size for a bedtime read. It's like one story before bedtime. They're inspiration, feel good stories of valor and royalty that, guaranteed to give you these good dreams. So, did you, picture the book being a nice little bedtime read?
Yes, now that you mention it, I'm sure as they one story at night would make them dream about that particular
Yeah.
king or queen, and that would really do them a lot of good.
Yeah, so moving away
Uh,
from this book, I want to definitely talk about your stint with Tinkle, and characters like Supandi and Shikari Shambhu, Kalia. These are iconic and they've lived on for generations. So you were responsible for writing one such glorious character, right? Pyare Lal and Lajwanti. How
yeah,
did you come
yes.
up with all those stories? I would love to hear some anecdotes from that time.
How did I just don't know how. That is with our respected Mr. Anant Pai, who is the founder, who is the father of Amar Chitrakatha and
Hmm.
Tinkle. So, this was long ago. I met him, and during the conversation, he said, "Why don't you write something for Tinkle?"
Hmm.
With a very interesting character. He just gave me a hint. And that started me thinking. I said, why shouldn't I do this? Why shouldn't I do this? And then, enough of city characters, I must go to the village, take up a rural character and make him really large hearted and warm hearted. And he gets into all sorts of little Mr. Anand, I would like to call it misadventures of Pyarelal, not adventures, but miss in brackets, MIS, miss in brackets, and adventures of Pyarelal. He used to get into all sorts of scraps and finally he came out successful, doing
Hmm.
some good for society. Now, all my stories, I'd like some message to go to children, like the historical tales, of course, about our kings and queens, and Pyarelal also, humorous incidents and all that. But at the end of the day, there is some message about the environment, about kind-heartedness, looking after animals, or something like that. A message goes through the to the children. Every short story, I make it a point to see that some message goes through the story to the children. It's not didactic, it's just woven into the story. So
Right.
that after reading the story, the child gets the message and learns to live a better life. That sort of feeling I had. And so many, I must have written more than 100 parallel stories. Each one had a message of its own. And now that I'm doing storytelling,
Yeah.
that has more leeway. With writing means you have to work within a few parameters and you have
Hmm.
the framework and all that. Now, when you're telling stories to children, you can interact with them, ask them questions, see that the message goes through, see that they are enjoying the story,
Yeah.
and you can further embellish the story. That's why I like storytelling now.
So which is easier for you to do, writing humor in form of Pyare Lal stories or writing historical stories like Queen Who Ruled the Waves? What comes easier to you?
Um, there's nothing more or less about. Once I get into one thing, then I'm totally into it. I
Hmm.
like it the best at that moment. Parallel actually became a household word. All of
Yes.
us in the family, oh, don't think you're as smart as Pyarelal. Or
Or Lajwanti more like.
yes, or Lajwanti. Don't sulk like Lajwanti. That's what we used to talk about Pyarelal and Lajwanti as though they were family members. So that way I got through and through into parallel
Right.
stories. So every story I enjoy while writing it. If I don't enjoy writing a story, then it doesn't get published.
It
That I
doesn't
have
come out well.
seen.
That's a lovely
uh,
attitude to have. So, Indra, I think now is like a great time for us to pause and try and take the rapid fire round.
Okay, I'm ready.
Lovely. Okay, your first question. Your favorite children's book?
My favorite student, any day I would vote for Pyarelal.
Okay.
Oh, you mean of other authors?
Any,
I
yes.
like Ruskin Bond, the way
Ruskin.
he writes, and as though he's talking to the children, you know.
Hmm.
So he's a good author, and
Lovely.
I would like to talk more about Indian authors only.
Oh, of
So
course, of course.
Ruskin Bond.
That's what the
So
show is all about, Indian authors.
yeah, I know.
Okay, so
So
one children's book you wished you had written.
Subhadra Sen-Gupta's book on
Oh,
about historical characters.
oh, lovely.
But she must have loved history from the day she was born. So
Shows in her books.
I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
yeah, so I like
Okay,
her
so
stories.
the most exciting thing in Indian children's literature right now.
I think the for the younger children, the Pratham books is bringing out very good books,
Mm-hmm.
and World Storytelling Day, they send out a couple of their books to storytellers like us,
Mm-hmm.
and they ask us to take the stories to the nearby schools or anywhere and tell the stories to the children. That's an exciting thing that Pratham books are doing, and they make it bilingual. So I go to a Tamil medium school nearby,
Mm-hmm.
and there I read it out in English, and then they read it out in Hindi, in Tamil also, and then I interact with them and ask them questions, and they come out with very beautiful responses. So Pratham is doing a very good job that way.
Oh, very nice.
Uh,
Nice to hear that. Yeah. So the one genre of books you are yet to write, like something that you want to experiment with.
Science,
Science. Okay.
something on science, and no, more before that, I thought of the railways. Railway,
Railways.
the
Okay.
romance of railways. There's very little written for children about railways. How it's our country has got one of the biggest railway networks today, and how if, right from the bullock cart thing, slowly we changed on, and how the Britishers introduced the railways, and how
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning there was a lot of chaos and all. They didn't want that steam engine coming in and all that. So that makes very interesting reading. So I would really like to do that for children,
Oh, beautiful.
giving little snippets in between about how we, in our younger days, we travel by train, and these children today, they don't know anything about that type of train travel and all that. My father
Agreed.
was in the railways throughout. My father-in-law was also partly in the railways. So I have a lot of material to write, but I should know how to put it in the right way and bring it out for children. I
Oh,
would like to
brilliant.
do that really. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So your favorite character from The Queen Who Ruled the Waves, which king slash queen are you most fond of?
I like the Shora dynasty,
Chola
the
dynasty.
Pallava dynasty and the Shora dynasty. And earlier to that, in the Sangam period, there have been some really good kings and queens,
Hmm.
of which we know very little. Especially South Indian history, I don't know, like for example, Veerapandya Kattabomman, who gave up his life
Hmm.
trying to fight against the British and all that. So I like that era very much, the
Okay.
earlier.
Okay. So if Pyare Lal, Shikhari Shambhu, and Tantri the Mantri were chatting, what would they be talking about?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I think Tantri Mantri would take the cake. He is ready with his wit, isn't it? So, whatever the others say, he will come up with something of his own, and the others would just have to laugh it out. That's all. So, that would be really interesting.
Lovely. Maybe we can weave a story around that.
Yeah, quite true. You've given me a good idea.
Like a comeback. Oh, definitely. I can't wait to see what you weave with that. So, I think you did really well in the rapid fire round, but Before I end the conversation, I definitely want to know from you what is coming up next. Is there a you mentioned you would love to write a book on the railways. Now I've given you an idea about Pyare Lal, Shikari, and Tantri.
Yes,
What is coming up next?
yeah.
What can we look forward to?
But parallel stories as such, now in Tinkle they have come with those illustrations and those little
Yeah.
conversations and all are their own. But the story part of it is mine. It is my copyright also. So I would like to bring out these parallel stories as a collection for the next generation children. The younger
Hmm.
ones now would love to read the parallel story. So I would like to bring them out as one collection. And I told you about the railway story.
Yeah.
And another is a Malayalam book, magazine for children called
Oh.
Mina Mani, brought out by Matrubhumi Publications. It's a very well-known publication.
Mm-hmm.
There they have everything in Malayalam, just one page they devote to an English, a story in English for the
Okay.
very young readers. You can imagine they've started learning in Malayalam,
Mm-hmm.
but they want to learn English also. So very small vocabulary, very short sentences, repetitive. Oh, I love to do these little stories, just about 250 to 300 words, and they
Okay.
make beautiful illustrations for those stories. So I want to bring those stories as a collection. So these are one or two of my future
Oh,
plans.
lovely. That sounds so nice. I'd love to see one of these stories. And thank you so much, Indra. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for spending your time with me, and I wish you all the best with the new stories that are going to be coming out.
Thank you very much, Rati, for this exposure.
That was such an incredible conversation. I hope you enjoyed it too. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast and spread the good word by sharing it with a friend. I'm Rati Girish and I'll be back very soon with another guest on Tell Me a Story.